As the camera follows Lee Harker progressing cautiously through a home, her gun trained on every empty space, we're dragged into her world of unease and unwavering panic. Moments earlier, she watched her partner get shot point blank in the face, an event so shocking that it leaves her and the audience gripped by a nauseating sense of paranoia. We don't just see the fear, we feel it, both raw and relentless in real time. This is a recurring motif of Longlegs, the latest directorial effort from Osgood Perkins, the man behind The Black Coat's Daughter and an upcoming 2025 release, The Monkey. Labelled as one of the scariest movies ever made in the pre-release marketing, Longlegs sparked an interesting debate into the severity of the horror on display. The discussion, however relevant it might have been, sadly missed out on the crucial nuance that horror so often has. The genre, of course, is heavily subjective. What terrifies you might not necessarily terrify me, and vice versa. But Longlegs is one of those films that struck a nerve with me personally, and I'd like to explore why. Whether it's the eerie silence of the dark moments, the unnerving presence of a killer whose motives blur the line between something human and something far worse, or the way in which it leads us down a rabbit hole of psychological dread and terror, leaving us to question everything we know about fear. There's something undeniably sinister that causes Longlegs to linger long after the credits roll. Part crime procedural, part supernatural horror, it carves out its own space in this year's horror landscape, feeling cold and cynical, yet deeply emotional at the same time, forcing its audience to confront horrors that lurk within and beyond. Today I wanted to take a look at Longlegs, examining how it builds terror from its subtly hostile atmosphere to its deeply unsettling themes. How does it toy with our expectations, and why does it leave us in a constant state of unease? Let's dive in and uncover why Longlegs terrified me, and why it might have just terrified you as well. Osgood Perkins is a man whose blood is tied to horror. As the son of Anthony Perkins, one of the genre's most iconic figures for his portrayal of Norman Bates in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, it's no surprise that Osgood Perkins has carved out a unique place in the genre. From the oppressive dread of The Black Coat's Daughter to the haunting reimagining of Gretel and Hansel, his work has always leaned towards the unsettling, favouring slow burn narratives and unsettling imagery over jump scares and spectacle. However, while his work is respected within horror circles, Perkins is yet to become that household name outside of the genre. While his films are definitely appreciated and they've maintained a cult appeal, they haven't reached the blockbuster status of other known directors like Ari Aster or Jordan Peele. With Longlegs though, it feels that Perkins is ready to step into that spotlight. This almost feels like a culmination of his style, a perfect blend of the meticulous detail found in crime procedurals and the dread-soaked atmosphere of a supernatural horror. It's a combination that feels at once familiar and unique, drawing comparisons to The Silence of the Lambs while carving out a space entirely on its own. The hype surrounding this release was undeniable. From early screenings, critics and audiences had described it as one of the most terrifying films in recent memory. This wasn't like every other horror film, this was positioned as an event, a benchmark for this modern interpretation of the genre. Naturally, with expectations like that comes scrutiny, and Longlegs quickly became a debate point. Is this thing truly the pinnacle of horror, or is it just another overblown, overhyped release? In a horror landscape that is increasingly defined by high-concept premises and what some people call franchise fatigue, Longlegs feels like a return to something primal. It's quiet, deliberately intricate, and deeply psychological. Perkins doesn't just want to scare you, he wants his story to embed itself in your mind, leaving you with this gnawing sense of unease. And it works. For me at least, Longlegs is able to capture that rare balance of technical brilliance and thematic depth, creating an experience that feels both human and alien. But to fully understand what made this film so effective, we're gonna have to go deeper. We're gonna have to look at the characters, the themes, and the techniques used to craft this depiction of terror. The horror of Longlegs begins with the premise, one that feels deceptively simple at first but unfolds into something profoundly unsettling. At its core, the story is a psychological and supernatural thriller, blending that methodical pacing of a crime procedural with an eerie descent into satanic connections and what lies beyond human understanding. The film follows Lee Harker, played by Maika Monroe, an FBI agent investigating a series of grisly murders committed by the depraved killer known as Longlegs. As the case deepens, so does that lingering sense of unease. The more Lee uncovers, the further she falls into a reality that feels increasingly unsteady, blurring those lines between what is real and what feels otherworldly. This premise sets the stage for several key themes: obsession, fear of the unknown, and that thin boundary between humanity and monstrosity. Lee's journey isn't just about solving a mystery, it's about confronting the limits of her understanding and her morality. As the titular killer becomes more central to this narrative, his actions challenge the very nature of good and evil, pushing the audience to question their assumptions about fear and control. These themes aren't delivered through heavy-handed exposition, but are subtly woven into the narrative, unfolding through deliberate pacing and haunting character interactions. Much of the film's emotional and thematic weight is carried by the technical execution. The cinematography is stark and deliberate, with long static shots that force the viewer to sit with the tension, scanning every inch of the frame for what could emerge. Shadows feel alive in every shot, stretching and consuming each frame, hinting at threats that may never materialise but remain ever present. Sound design is equally pivotal, using silence as much as noise to create dread. In Longlegs, silence becomes a character, a vast, suffocating presence that makes every small creak and whisper feel like a jolt to the system. The sparse but unnervingly effective score complements this, threading an undercurrent of dissonance that intensifies as the narrative progresses. These technical elements converge in key moments that linger long after the credits roll. One example comes when Lee, alone in her dimly lit home, suddenly senses a presence just beyond her sight. But the camera lingers, refusing to cut away as the silence stretches unbearably thin. It's not necessarily what you see in this moment, but what you anticipate, what you imagine, that makes the scene so terrifying. By the time the film reaches its climax, every element of the horror has been carefully calibrated to immerse the audience completely. The story, themes, and technical execution work in harmony to create a fear that doesn't just end with the credits. Instead, Longlegs leaves you with this lingering unease, a haunting that feels both external and internal, forcing you to carry its weight long after the screen fades to black. Longlegs had a unique impact on me because it's one of the rare times that I've left the cinema feeling truly shaken. I felt really uneasy with what I'd just watched, and that in turn created an odd fascination with this movie. There are moments from this film that I feel I just can't let go of, moments that keep playing in my mind, trying to figure out why they affect me the way that they do. One scene that stands out is when Lee realises her past connection to the killer, when the investigation becomes more than just catching him, but something personal and far more terrifying. The way that realisation is captured in the moment, not through words but through silence and Maika Monroe's restrained performance, feels like a punch to the gut. It's one of those rare instances in film where I felt completely in sync with a character's dread, their disorientation, and their creeping understanding of just how far this rabbit hole goes. Another moment is less of a specific scene and more Longlegs' constant presence. This is a figure that embodies so much more than physical terror. The ambiguity surrounding his character forces the audience to create their own information to fill in the gaps, and that, for me, was where the fear really began to fester. But it's not just his presence that unnerved me. Longlegs has this way of tapping into the uncanny valley, where things feel off in a way that I can't quite explain. The eeriness of it all was something that felt familiar and yet strange at the same time. That unsettling feeling of seeing things that were almost human but at the same time most definitely not really got under my skin. But beyond the fear and the tension, what stayed with me most of all was the emotional weight behind the film. There's a deep, undeniable sadness that runs through Longlegs. It's not just about the horror of what's on screen, it's about the horror of what lingers in the aftermath. This film asks questions that we're not necessarily prepared to answer. How much of the darkness in this world is external, and how much of it do we actually carry within us? I think that's what makes the film so personal for me. It's not just a story of an FBI agent chasing a killer or the killer itself. It's a story about humanity, about fragility and the things that we fear the most due to an innate lack of understanding. Perkins has crafted something that terrifies us because we are not familiar with it, and in doing this, he forces us to confront those fears long after the film ends. Longlegs feels both timely and timeless, offering a take on the psychological and supernatural thriller, while also drawing upon long-standing traditions of the genre. It's not a film that reinvents horror in a radical sense, but it does elevate it. By blending dread with methodical pacing and a deep emotional weight, Osgood Perkins has crafted a work that refuses to be dismissed as just another horror movie. Longlegs feels like a direct response to the more spectacle-driven horror films that have dominated this genre for quite a while. Where many films focus on the shock value of jump scares, Perkins opts for something much more insidious, a slow burn that builds fear with every passing moment. It rewards patience, demanding the audience's attention and immersing them in a labyrinth. This kind of horror, subtle, psychological and deeply unsettling, is becoming increasingly rare in a genre dominated by loud noises and quick thrills, making Longlegs stand out as a highlight of 2024's horror offerings. While it's difficult to say definitively where it will be remembered in the years to come, I do think that this is a film that will remain important for its refusal to rely on easy scares. It's a movie that doesn't just want you to feel fear, it wants you to think about it, reflect on it, and carry that unease with you long after you leave the cinema. Films like Longlegs don't just enter the conversation for a season, they redefine what it means to unsettle the audience. Its emotional complexity and intellectual engagement with fear could shape the direction of horror in the coming years, influencing filmmakers who are eager to push the genre beyond its long-tired tropes. The lasting impact on viewers, I think, will be similar to the way that other cult horror films have endured over time. Whether it becomes this touchstone for psychological horror or remains this sleeper hit that goes relatively unknown, Longlegs has the ability to tie itself into the fabric of horror culture. For years to come, there is going to be a large portion of people that reference this as a film that made them fear more than that usual thrill of fear. It's going to leave an impression, an emotional scar that's going to take time for some people to let it fade. In a genre that's often quick to churn out sequels, reboots and formulaic entries, Longlegs represents a refreshing reminder of what horror can achieve when it dares to be different. It proves that horror is, at its best, a reflection of our own darkest fears, and films like this will continue to shape the genre for years to come. Longlegs terrified me because it taps into something primal. The fear of the unknown, the horror of what we can't fully understand. It isn't just the eerie silence or the unsettling presence of its villain, but the psychological weight that lingers long after the screen fades. Through a slow burn narrative, deeply unsettling themes and technical brilliance, Osgood Perkins has made a film that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about being scared. It's a film that doesn't just stop at instilling fear. This thing wants to haunt you, to burrow into your mind and force you to confront the darkness inside and out. For me, that's what made it so terrifying. It lingers in a way that few films manage, remaining with you both unsettled and unresolved.